You're joining us just at the start of the first race of the RS Inland 2024. I think that was the gun zone just there. You can see we just launched ourselves off the line, built ourselves a nice little lane, plenty of room up to windward, and when the camera switches back around, there you go, you can see we've got a good gap to the boat to leeward as well, so that's going to give us plenty of runway to get loads of speed out of the boat and get shifting as fast as possible. You can see we're both working really hard. Chris has had his arm right out over the side above his head, trying to get maximum leverage and really get the boat going as fast as possible at this point in the race. You can see here that we've just started to move forward on the boat underneath us. He's no longer in shot. And when we look back up the line, which we will do in a second, you'll see we started to make pretty good gains on the rest of the fleet. There we go. So we've got Tom and Paul just above us going quite nicely. But actually, we've built a really good gap and we're going quite nicely at this point in the race. We're about 30 seconds or so into the race now, so we're still working pretty hard at this point. Both staying reasonably flat, I would say. We sort of know what our first move is going to be, so we're going to wait for the rest of the fleet to tack, and then we're going to follow with them. We reckon this left-hand side is the way to go up this beat, hence why we started more down towards that pin end. But first of all, unless we get a really good leap here, we're not going to be able to tack across the fleet, so we've just got to wait for everyone else. You can see me starting to look now to see if there's any chance we'll get across. And what's actually happened is there's been a bit of a lift actually, which means that boat inside us, Tom and Paul, has lifted really nicely and is effectively blocking us from that tack. So we're just going to have to hold here until they finally go. You can see Chris looking as well, both of us looking, just waiting. Chris is going to call when it looks like they're about to go. In fact, they just appeared in shot there. See, that shows how sort of far forward they've managed to get on us through that shift. They've now gone, so we're probably going to look to go in the next few seconds. I hope that the reason they went is because there was a nice shift with it. And there we go. That was pretty nice for a pretty decent tack. You can see there's a couple of boats who've just got across the bow of Tom and Paul, but it looks like that's all that's in front of us at this point. So that's Stuart and Sarah who've just tacked, and that's Nick and Toby who are just tacking on top of them, very helpfully for us because it forces Stuart and Sarah to tack back off. So here they come right across our bow, really close. We've had to do quite a big duck on them, which hopefully means that when they tack back, there they go, we've actually got a bit of a run on them, and we can start to squeeze them out if we've got the speed. Now looking back, this actually looks like quite a good position. It does feel like the breeze is slowly rotating to the left slightly and we're starting to lift up a little. At this point, we're pretty much aiming right at the windward mark. We're now on the final approach to the windward mark. You can see we've done a pretty good job on Stuart and Sarah, and yeah, we have managed to squeeze them out, and now we're all about trying to find a gap into the windward mark. Not too much room here, but it looks like there's just a gap big enough for us to slip in just before Ollie and Esther get there. Again, half decent tack and managed to get the bearaway done quite cleanly. Chris is straight into the hoist. There we go. Pretty nice set. And off we go. Just got a little spreader mark here before we get on to the proper run. As we approach the windward mark there, we had a really big lift in. In fact, we overstood by quite a distance and had to reach down. The boats underneath us got a lift right up to the buoy. So at the moment, we're going to stick on this jibe. We're not going to make any manoeuvres just yet because we reckon this is taking us nice and low towards that bottom mark. We've got over the top of Ollie and Esther there, but because they're down inside us going quite nicely still, they're sort of blocking us from jibing unless we go behind them. But I think I've seen a decent bit of breeze come down the middle of the course, yeah, so we decided to go for it. And we'll just take their sterns and see how that goes. The other discussion we've just had is that, of course, as we approach the windward mark, we had a lift, which of course turns into a header as we come downwind. Well, hopefully that should mean that the opposite is true at the bottom mark, so it should head us as we head towards that bottom mark as well, hence why we've gone a little bit earlier than some of the other boats. You saw Sarah and Stuart with the black kite just go across our bow. They've just jibed behind us, and we've actually managed to get over the top of them. You can see them with the black kite there. And in fact, Ollie and Esther, who went maybe another 50-60 yards, are actually struggling to get back up to the mark now. They've really overlaid on the gate and not got the best angle in. You can see us here going pretty much flat out with the two of us on the side, and we're aiming right at the middle of the gate, which is just about perfect. So we've judged that really nicely. In fact, if anything, we've probably gone a little late ourselves. You can see the main's quite far out, so we're still dumping some power, trying to get up to the gate and get through it. That's Tom and Paul with the blue kite just underneath us, so you can see they're quite a bit lower than us, so hopefully this will allow us to take some meters back off them. Behind, you can see Sarah and Stuart with the black kite coming down pretty much the same angle as us and going quite nicely, and the sky blue kite of Ollie and Esther, they've really struggled and they've lost a lot of distance on us. And in fact, this sort of light yellow kite, neon yellow kite up to the right, that's Chris and Nikki. They've done really nicely. They were in a really high lane, and yet with the shift and the extra breeze, they've managed to get down to the lay really nicely, and probably going to be rounding right on top of Sarah and Stuart, which is great for us because we want the guys to be behind us to be having a good battle now that we've got a bit of clear air. We've chosen to go to the opposite mark to Tom and Paul. We just think that with the rest of the fleet coming really tight down that starboard ley line, that if we'd have made the big manoeuvre and gone back around ourselves and gone to that right-hand mark, we'd be going effectively beating up underneath the rest of the fleet coming down with their spinnakers, and that's not going to be great. It's going to give us plenty of disturbed air and slow us down. So we've gone around this left-hand mark, lots of clear air, and actually we're going to tack nice and early just so that we do stick close to Tom and Paul. And in fact, Chris and Nikki below us who've both tacked as well. This just keeps us nicely in touch with the fleet, so we're not splitting too far, and we're effectively protecting our position at the moment. You can see now that both boats ahead of us have just tacked, so that's probably signifying that there's a shift on its way. In fact, there it is. We've tacked for it, and actually turned out to be quite a big shift, so it's definitely worth tacking on. And pretty much everyone in the top 4 or 5 behind us follows, so that works quite nicely. It means that we're not going to lose any positions because everyone's going the same way as us. So for now, we're happy just to stick with the fleet and protect our position. Third's pretty good for a first race. Probably not going to end up being our discard, so we're quite happy. As we head out to this right-hand side, we're sort of both aware that last time there was that big shift at the top mark that actually favoured the left-hand side, but we've hit a really nice gust here, and it actually feels like it's doing the opposite this time. So once again, we've managed to overlay the mark, and you can see Tom and Paul have got it absolutely bang on, and probably tacked maybe 20-30 yards before we did, and have still made it up to the buoy. So that was a bit of an oversight on our part, but we made good speed, and we're actually probably a little closer than we were at the bottom. So a job well done, I guess, for that beat. We certainly haven't lost anything, and that's the main thing for us at this point. So back down onto the run. Again, we think that pretty much the same is going to happen. So although there's not that big shift at the top of the course, we think that as we get down to the bottom, it's going to shift again and really hammer us as we come in on the port ley line. You can see Ollie and Esther solid 4th there just behind us with the sky blue kite. Here we are, we've lined up pretty much as we did on the last leg, so inside the boat just ahead. So you can see with the dark blue kite, that's Tom and Paul. They probably went an extra 50-60 yards along the starboard ley line before they decided to jibe, and we're now sat well inside them in a nice gust, and again we're pointing right at the middle of the gate, and they're having to work really hard to make some distance up to windward and hope that they can make it through. You can see behind us we've made good gains on Ollie and Esther and Chris and Nikki, so we've got a good bit of distance back to 4th and 5th, which means that we can actually go quite hard now at Tom and Paul if we want to. Know we've got that distance in our pocket, so we're probably going to take a few extra risks up this next beat and see if we can narrow that gap to the boat ahead. We're now approaching the leeward gate. There goes the kite. Chris gets it all tied away nice and quickly. We're going to go for the same mark as we went round last time, but this time Tom and Paul decided to go the same way as us, so they've already gone round. You can see them just ahead of us. They've actually had some kite trouble, which is obviously a terrible shame, but it does mean that we can slip up inside them while they're sorting that out and see if we can get control of them. Now that we're here, we're sort of blocking them off that first tack if we can hold position, and that means that we're going to dictate the next move, which is a really strong place to be. So, but first of all, we've got to hang on in here and make sure that either they don't try and squeeze us out, or that we don't fall behind too much. So we've still got quite a battle on our hands here. Just behind us here, you can see Ollie and Esther, and just got around the buoy are Chris and Nikki. So like I said earlier, we've got a bit of distance on them. Chris and Nikki have actually just gone for their first attack, but probably not as much as I first thought, so we're still going to have to be quite careful if we do start making any big moves, that we're not losing out too far to those guys behind. They're both attacked now, so we're probably going to want to think about going quite soon just to make sure that we don't lose any extra distance on them and that we're nice and secure in our third place. Being said that, you can see that we're locked in a sort of private battle with Tom and Paul here, so our heads are firmly looking towards the front of the boat and towards Tom and Paul rather than what's going on behind, so there's a good chance that we haven't actually noticed what the other two have done yet. Even so, yeah, there we go, looking over my shoulder now, and I think I'm about to call the tack to sort of say, right, let's not get ourselves too far out this side and lose touch with the rest of the fleet. There we go. Nice, yeah, pretty good. And now we're going to head back towards the centre of the course and try and keep tabs on the two boats just behind us. And we're also going to hope that Tom and Paul follow us so that we're all nice and compact and nice and tight together, and there's not too much risk of anyone getting either too far ahead or overtaking us. We're now back pretty much dead centre on the course. It didn't work out exactly as we wanted, so Tom and Paul held on a little bit longer and have picked up a really nice lift on the way in. You can just see them to the right a shot there without the RS logo on their sail, so they've done really well and probably stepped away from us a bit there. So now it's down to sort of plan B, which is defending our third place. Tom and Paul have probably done enough there to get away from us. I don't think we're going to be able to catch them. We've only got one more downwind leg. So it's now pretty much into almost like full defence mode, so just making sure the others can't get us. Now both Ollie and Esther and Chris and Nikki tacked and crossed behind us about a minute or so ago. So they're also heading out to that right-hand side. So that doesn't bode very well for us because they're going to be in that shift that Tom and Paul have picked up. In fact, you can see them there. So that's Tom and Paul just crossing almost directly ahead of us, and then the two boats to the right that you can see on the right of the shot. The leading one of those is Ollie and Esther, and the second one is Chris and Nikki. You can really see as we've come together, they've really narrowed that gap between us. In fact, it's not helped thereby. You just saw briefly there, yeah, Tom and Paul tacking right on top of us. They're also trying to do the same. They're also to make sure that we don't make any gains on them. Here you can see just how close Ollie and Esther have managed to get to us. So probably no more than 3 or 4 boat lengths in it now. So really getting quite tight. Not really what we want. We're actually quite lucky there because they've just misjudged that ley line, so they're going to have to do a double tack. Hopefully that gives us a little more breathing room, which we're probably going to need because both Ollie and Esther and Chris and Nikki are absolutely rapid downwind. So we don't want it to be particularly close when we go to that downwind leg. You can see Ollie and Esther just having probably a couple of boat lengths in it. They just have to do a really small double tack just to be able to get round. But again, that gives us a good bit of room now. And that might make this last run to home a little easier. But there's still not a whole lot in it. You can see I'm now looking around pretty frantically, looking for any sort of wind that might help us get away, go for an early jibe this time. I think I've spotted a decent gust that's rolling down the course and might get us a bit of distance. Behind us, Ollie and Esther keep going, but Chris and Nikki have followed us, so we've got a bit of a split, which is not the greatest thing for us, because if Ollie and Esther get anything at all, then they could be coming past us. And the same, we've now got Chris and Nikki right on our tails, and we're a little concerned that we're going to have to do some defending to keep our position, and all that is just slowing us down. That pressure that I saw earlier is just about to arrive, so we're going to hook into a decent bit of pressure, which just gets us away from Chris and Nikki. But as we look backwards, there we are, we'll see they're just going to roll into a jibe. So we're right on the front of this gust, and they're going to sort of take a jibe into it and see if they can extend the sort of ride for a little bit longer if they can. But now we're just continuing on the way we're going. But again, we're thinking about defending, so we're probably going to jibe soon unless we get a really big gust. Yeah, we're just rolling quite nicely at the moment. Oh, just didn't see that. A bit of avoiding action there. Good call from Chris. But at the moment, you can see we're rolling pretty nicely, both on the side, both trucking along. So no real need to do anything just yet. You can see the boom's quite far out of the centre line, so we're still driving for some depth at this point and thinking about trying to take some distance out of the course. But you can see me constantly looking under the boom because I'm desperate to get that jibe back across at some point and see if we can defend from the other two boats behind us. Just make sure that they don't fall into anything that we don't get. You know, if there's a big gust that they catch, we want to be in it at the same time to make sure they can't pull any distance out of us. We're both having a look around the course at the moment just to assess our options. Chris is looking over his shoulder, just seeing if there's likely to be any gusts that are going to catch us in the next sort of 20 to 30 seconds that it might be worth hanging on for. But you can see me taking a real good look now at that jibe, and we made the call to go for it now. Here we go. Ooh, not the best jibe, quite a lot of heel in that one, but we get through. Any jibe where you're dry is probably a good jibe at this point. You can see just off to the right there, looking very small, sort of just underneath my tiller. That's Chris and Nikki with the neon yellow kite. Picked up on our lovely gust, that gust that we were just in. We've come in across and we've jibed on it, which is absolutely perfect. So we're ripping along now, really going nicely. Just below my tiller, you can see Chris and Nikki and Ollie and Esther there. So they're right on the ley line into the bottom mark now. So we've got a jibe from the finish line. We've got an RS400 here. Yeah, there you go, just jibing through the gate. You saw the boy to the left there. So now it's a race to the finish. Looks like we've got it pretty clearly, but as you can see, that's a little bit tighter than we'd have liked. Bearing in mind the lead we had at one point, but hey, tight racing is what it's all about. Another great race, really good racing as ever at Grafham.